Well, they do. You know, every official within the tax department operating at that level is actually got immunity. That's something, that's a whole other story. However, what we courteously reminded them was there is no immunity against crimes against humanity and fraud, and because it deceives one. Fraud, which is an attempted enslavement, and slavery were crimes against humanity, and then we wish them a good day. So this is where we're getting into the situation where we have beliefs throughout the judiciary that do not stack up. They're not logical. They don't stack up to law. You know? You go into the 1990 New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Section 28 says an existing right or freedom cannot be seen to be abrogated or restricted just because it does not appear in whole or in part within this act. So there's all our rights. The right's still there. Most important, one right. The right of self-determination. If you do not have the right of self-determination, the right to determine your affairs whilst causing harm, while causing no harm to another, if you do not have that right, you are someone's slave. There is no grey area here. So all those people who are waiting for something else to get sorted are going to be waiting a long time. Now, the Article 2, just to reinforce this in case they missed it the first time, nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein. Well, that's a fairly emphatic statement. I mean, like, even I can follow that and make sense of that. What puzzles me is why the Constabulary, the Judiciary and the politicians can't. Because we actually have a body here where any legislation that goes in is meant to be reviewed to see that it aligns with human rights. I think they all went to sleep. Josephine, so lovely to see you.
Just for clarity, is this in plain and simple English, or is it legislative language, the human rights?
Natural and ordinary English.
Yeah.
Because legalese is the language of an association.
Okay.
Which actually, by the way, I couldn't find out that it had actually any lawful standing in this land.
So how is person defined? You know how persons defined?
Yeah, go to a dictionary and go to a dictionary and just look it up.
So just normal dictionary will explain the terms.
Because if it is written in a tricky language, like legalese, then it's a deception.
Yeah.
So if it's not written in the natural and ordinary, and it doesn't stipulate that what language it's written in, then it's a deception. It's designed to deceive. As I say, we have the rights. This is just of self-determination. This is just a way of suggesting, what governments have bound themselves to, a way of upholding that absolute right of self-determination. Give people a few guidelines. Everyone has the right, Article 8, everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. Well, we don't have that here. Because what we've got is a bunch of kangaroo courts, for want of a better term. Right? The tribunals, they're not operating. I've said to a judge, is this a court of law? And he goes, of course it is. Well, he was completely and absolutely wrong. Because it wasn't. Because he wasn't operating lawfully. The structure wasn't lawful. And this creates a little concern within the court when you're standing in there and you're actually knowing more about how the process is supposed to operate than what they do, because they are so caught up in their own bullshit. For years and years and years, these people have been indoctrinated into a way of thought and they believe it. And they have lost the ability to apply logic. So they have been taught what to think, not how to think. And that creates a problem. So it gives us an opportunity to actually educate them. Because after all, they are servants of the people. And we're the people. Servant of the people, people. Public servant, public. Public servant, public. Public servant, public. Who's the master here? You know, it's like we're allowed the servants to kick our ass out of the house and they've moved in. They go, now you're going to pay to get in. Get out of here. So I strongly urge you to raise your children with these things, bring this to their attention. Now, just because you have rights, with rights comes responsibilities. So again, it outlines Article 20 is one that's very relevant. Article 20 bar 2, no one may be compelled to belong to an association. So when they write an act for the public service, and they stipulate act to bind the Crown, which is completely logical, because that's who's writing the legislation for them, they cannot compel me to be a member of that association. I can only become a member of that association by free will choice. If I'm forced into that situation, tricked into that association, that's a deception, that's fraud, that's a crime. It's a crime against humanity. You're attempting to enslave me. Now these things can be used exactly like legislation, as find out what's relevant and send it to them. Article 26. Who here has got a student loan? Who here knows of somebody that has a student loan?
Yeah, I've got a
Well,
student
that's
loan.
one of most of us, isn't it? Yeah, I have one of those. It disappeared with one letter. I wrote to Selena, I did a Bachelor of Education back in 2001 to 2003. I had actually looked at, we're looking at having a family, and I'm a professional fisherman. That's my trade, and professional fishing and family, generally, often young families aren't quite conducive to harmonious relationships because you're away a lot. So I always had a fascination and enjoyed interacting with kids and teaching and teaching. So I thought, well, it seems like most of the adult population's a little bit slow to catch on to who they are. Maybe we can start educating the next generation as to who they are, because they already actually know, and a lot of them are an absolute aghast as to what their adults are doing. So anyway, I did a Bachelor of Education, and from that I ended up with a student loan. I thought, well, that's interesting, because other people I know, when they went and learned to become a teacher, they were paid to do it. Because it's going to be a service to the society. So anyway, I came across this interesting article here, because that just didn't feel right to me. So what I did was I wrote into StudyLink after I finished my degree, and I just said along the lines of, it is my understanding, and is it not true? So I'm asking a question. When you ask a question, what you do is you're putting up antennas for an answer, so anybody that reads the question is also subconsciously asking that question of themselves. Helps them wake up. So I said, it is my understanding, and is it not true, that New Zealand is signatory to internationally recognised documentation, being the 48th Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where in Article 26 it says, education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. It was fundamental for me to become a teacher, to do a Bachelor of Education. Therefore, my education, it is my understanding that my education is free. If you can show how I am bound or obliged to pay you or give you anything in any way, shape or form, please do so, or forever keep the peace. Until my understanding is rebutted to an exacting point of law, it prevails in truth of law, and I have never heard another thing from them. Why? Because of that. Because student loans are a scam. Student loans are debt bondage. That's a form of slavery, still written in the 1961 Crimes Act, Section 98, slavery through debt bondage. Student loans are debt bondage. We'll get on to rates and councils later. That's another one. So anyway, that's just one there with the Article 26. So when you go through these articles, have a read of them, have a look at these articles as how our society is functioning now. Think about the legislation that's being imposed upon us, because we're not agreeing to it. Some, then they should adhere to it, that's their choice. But those of us who are not agreeing to it, those of us who are not agreeing to have things like vitamin C labelled as an A-class drug, those of us not agreeing to be told what modality we can use to heal ourselves and our families, and what food we have to eat, those of us not agreeing to that, how can that be imposed upon us? Because if the one imposing the ideology, and it's not it's not such a good idea, and everybody is bound by it, then we really are in trouble. And that's why we're in the situation we're in now, because of what we believe, rather than what we should know. It's not about chaos. In fact, if the rule of law, the rule of agreement of the parties, and if the public servants operated to their oaths of office, you would get through a whole heap of the pain that is being caused in our society today, just by that simple thing. Invoke the oaths of office of public servants. They voluntarily took the oath. They are being supposedly paid by the people to carry out this service to the people. Therefore, they have an obligation. They have received fair consideration for their services. As soon as they step out of their oath of office, they're actually operating in fraud, because they're taking money for something they're not being paid to do. They're paid to uphold their oaths of office and to be of service to we, the people. That's why we pay them. So as soon as they move away from that, they're actually stepping into a fraudulent situation. And we need to start calling these things for what they are, because what it does is it shines a light upon it. You know, we've got pirates running the show. Why do we know they're pirates? Because you're only going to have a look at what they do. It's piracy. You know, when somebody pirates your name and uses it, puts a fraudulent usufructory right over your name. Who knows what an usufruct is? Oh, cool. For those of you who don't know, an usufruct is somebody who has the right to use somebody else's property and gain all benefits and advantages from the use of that property, as long as the property is not diminished or damaged. So as I say, if you do not understand about usufruct, right. So you've got to get that into your head. So somebody's put a fraudulent usufruct over our names because you didn't agree to it, your parents didn't agree to it. I mean, what parents are going to say? They say, oh, if you fill out that paper, man, you're going to actually be enslaving your child forever and ever. No parent's going to do it, so it's fraud. It's done with deception. So when we start calling these things what they are, what we're doing is actually shining a light upon it. Slavery is slavery. Doesn't matter how you dress it up, it's slavery. Fraud is fraud. You know? Deception is deception. Piracy is piracy. So if we start using these terms, then what you do is you start to wake more and more people up to what is actually being perpetrated upon them. Because me standing here today, all I see my role is just to share that which I know. Now, if somebody else wants to, if people feel that that's of use to them, then it's absolutely free for them to use. Because it's everybody's right. Knowledge is everybody's. Knowledge is for everybody. Knowledge is there to be shared by everybody. When knowledge is shared, it becomes a strength to the many. When it's kept to a few, it becomes a power to control and oppress. So we're actually enslaved by our ignorance, our unknowing. Firstly, for most people, is knowing who they are and knowing that they have that creator-given right of self-determination, the right to determine their own affairs whilst causing no harm to another. So I strongly urge you to get hold of the 48 Declaration and have a look at it. Now, I've talked about the Nuremberg principles. These come out of the Nuremberg trials, which there's a certain amount of conjecture around the Nuremberg trials, because a lot of that stuff that was going on was sheer propaganda. And if anybody's aware of Operation Paperclip, you'll know why. But anyway, from those trials, because what was happening was the main defence was, I was under orders. I was just a soldier. I was just a captain. Right? So from that came the Nuremberg principles. Any person who commits an act which constitutes a crime under international law is responsible, therefore liable to punishment. Now, when they talk about a crime under international law, they're talking about crimes against the peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. Okay? So we'll get down to those in a little bit and we'll just go through them in a bit more detail later. The fact that international law does not impose a penalty for an act which constitutes a crime under international law does not relieve the person who committed the act from the responsibility under international law. So we're operating in the international arena now. So if you have a public official or functionary that creates a crime against humanity, they're responsible under international law. Principle 3, the fact a person who committed an act which constitutes a crime under international law, acted as a head of state or responsible government official, does not relieve him from the responsibility under international law. You can't say, well, I'm the president of so-and-so, or the prime minister of this, or the king or queen of that, and I can go out and do whatever I like and lay waste to those who annoy me because I'm, the head of a country. No. Still responsible. You're a nurse injecting toxic chemicals into a child, you're responsible. Okay? Each is responsible for that which they do. The fact that a person acted pursuant to order of his government or of a superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, provided a moral choice was in fact possible to him. Now, we're in a situation where there's a moral choice actually available to every MP, and their moral choice is actually to stand to their oaths of office, their oaths of allegiance, and to uphold the documents that they're there, that they're meant to be upholding. So they have a moral choice available to them. Any person charged with a crime under international law has a right to a fair trial on the facts and law. The crimes hereinafter set out are punishable as crimes under international law. Oh, some of these will ring a bell for you. Planning, preparation, initiation or waging of a war of aggression or a war in violation of international treaties, agreements or assurances. 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights is international law. It's an agreement. It's an agreement of the parties. So with the other documents we talked about. Te Tiriti Waitangi is an internationally recognised treaty. Internationally recognised to the extent that it's actually being referred to as the most researched treaty in the history of humanity. Okay? So, straight away, under crimes against the peace, we have that being perpetrated upon us at the moment. Because one, we have a government, and I use that term in the broadest possible sense. We have a body in control, if you like, or just a bunch of pirates, who are actually overriding through legislation the human rights, the conventions on slavery, the civil and political rights of people. All these documents they've signed up to, they're overriding it. So these are international treaties and agreements, and they're being overridden. So what they're doing is they're committing crimes against the peace, and they are culpable for it. And people wonder why I have only but compassion for these people. No point being angry at them. They're in a state of disease. They actually need healing. They need our compassion, not our anger. Because our anger is what gives the centre the very energy it requires to oppress us all. So they need compassion, because actually they don't know what they're doing. They think they do, even those right at the top think they do. But if they actually apply a little logic to it, they would see how they have been deceived as well. But anyway, they're responsible and can be held responsible. Participation in a common plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of any of the acts mentioned under war crimes, violation of the laws or customs of war, which include but are not limited to murder, ill treatment, deportation of slave labour, or in any other purpose of the civilian population of or in occupied territory, murder or ill treatment of prisoners of war or persons on the seas, killing of hostages, plunder of public or private property. What do pirates do? They plunder. Take everything you can and leave nothing behind. Okay? So all our public assets, our public property, the things that our forebears worked to provide for us, are being plundered. Most of them being sold off now for cents on the dollar of their value. Private property. If you do not pay this fine that we're unlawfully imposing upon you, then we're going to come and steal your stuff. You're going to plunder my private property. Right? Wanton destruction of cities, towns or villages, or devastation not justified by military necessity. Crimes against humanity. Murder, extermination, enslavement, there it is. Deportation and other inhumane acts done against any civilian population or persecution on political, racial or religious grounds, when such acts are done or such persecutions are carried out in execution of or in connection with any crime against the peace. So talking about deporting Kiwis who are in Australia who have committed a crime and some of them to Christmas Island and deporting them back here. Again, this is, but all their family and everything is still over in Australia.
Because it's never about what it's about.
No. However, the upside of that is if they deported all the Kiwis in Australia back here to New Zealand and we deported all the Australian criminals back to Australia, it would probably raise the average IQ of both countries. So complicity in the commission of a crime against the peace. And that's what we're dealing with. These are crimes against humanity. This is crimes against the peace. This has gone beyond like legislative trickery. Because it's actually about enslavement. So those are the Nuremberg principles. Again, they're readily available online. Anybody can go online, have a look, pick them up, have a read. I use them in documentation now. Right.
Do you think Calvin Davis needs a copy of this talk today, Mark? He's over there at the moment.
Is he?
Yeah, the labouring people.
Really? I think all they should do is just stand to their oaths of office and educate themselves by receiving public money and stop operating in fraud, and we'd be a hell of a lot better off. This is not going to get fixed by politics. But yeah, put your proclamation in. When my new proclamation goes up, it's going to every public servant I can send it to. And what's great is about the internet. The information, the networks you can get, information trees. Every politician, every public servant. I am thus I am.
So the main guy to send it to would be the Attorney General, wouldn't it, or not?
I just send it to them all.
Oh,
Yeah.
that much paper on.
They're all nails in the same coffin. Because a lot of them are pretending to be in offices and are not actually in the office, so they're operating in deception, which is tantamount to fraud.
Do you have to send it in hard copy? Can you email it?
Send it any way you like. The question is, are you going to stand on it if it comes necessary? Whether it's in electronic, whether it's in hard copy, just send it. Get it out there. As soon as situation comes to court, just say, are you rebutting my proclamation? We don't recognise your proclamation. Is that a rebuttal of my proclamation? We'll attend to that later. Is that a rebuttal of my proclamation? We don't recognise, we can't see your proclamation. Is that a rebuttal of my proclamation? Because until you can rebut my proclamation, we aren't going anywhere. I don't care if you drag me off, throw me in the slammer, or drag me out and hang me from the nearest lamppost. I'm still going to be standing, I'll still be swinging there in my eye to the truth of the matter and for the salvation of our kids. Because we've got a responsibility. We better start upholding it, whether you've got children or not. We all hold a responsibility to the coming generations. Somebody said to me the other day, you just got to let it go past. I go, oh, and so what you're saying then is that I should teach my son how to be a good slave. Because there's no grey area in this. He either is going to be able to exercise his right of self-determination or he's going to be a slave. It's the same for all of us. So now it's time to put all the rhetoric and all the deceptions and all the bullshit aside and just get down to doing what needs to be done. Standing for our right of self-determination, and as most of you here know, and most people actually out there know, there are more than enough resources on this planet for every man, woman and child to live comfortably. Absolutely. Without question. Somebody the other day saying, too many people on the earth, we're running out of resources. No, there's too many greedy people on the earth. And I said to this gentleman, I said, so you think, he said, we need some form of population control. I said, so you think we need an orchestrated form of population control? Then he goes, yeah, we do. I said, good, I look forward to seeing your obituary in the paper in the next day or two. And he went, what are you on about? I said, well, if you believe there's too many people on this world, then step up to the plate. Go top yourself. Bit of more oxygen for the rest of us. In other words, if you believe that, then you stand to it. But we know that there is more than enough resources for every man, woman and child on this planet. It's just not enough for the greedy ones. And that's the disease that has beset humanity. It doesn't affect everybody. And often you don't know who it infects until you see it manifest. Families fighting families over money. Money is not the root of all evil. It's what people do with it. Money is still the greatest means of energy exchange we've created by man. It's just that it gets misused and abused and used to oppress rather than to facilitate the flow of energy.
Can I ask you, what's the difference between a proclamation and a declaration?
Probably the best way to explain that, America declared its independence with the Declaration of Independence. It would have been a little bit hard for them to proclaim that into its full entirety because they were the invader in someone else's land. A proclamation is the highest statement of truth one can make.
That sounds good.
A
to me.
declaration, you can declare something, doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually true. Okay? So when we proclaim, that's what I say, think carefully before you do this. You're making a proclamation. You are making an absolute heartfelt commitment. A statement of your truth. And when you actually proclaim your sovereignty, you are putting your services, your life, your existence into the hands of the Creator. It's not something you do lightly. Anyway, the 1956 Supplementary Convention on Slavery is another document well worth looking at. However, we will get into that in a minute. Let's just have a break for a bit. Then I can have a drink of water. Stretch your legs, shake everything around, and we'll move into that briefly in the next one.